All right, my English teacher friends, Kristian Kuhn coming at you again, affectionately known as the Bob Ross of composition. And I got another 5-minute thesis exercise for you. If you're new to me, let me briefly explain the impetus behind this. So I've taught AP Literature and 11 Regents, which is a New York State course. Both of them have exams tied to them with a fair amount of literary analysis. If my students are going to perform poorly on either of those exams, typically it comes down to the thesis. They don't know how to get anchored in a thesis, and that's where the wheels fall off the essay. So one of the things I do is I use Oscar nominated short films. So they are these short little brief like poems, vignettes, short stories that are about 5 minutes, 7 minutes long. YouTube has a glut of them. And in this particular piece, we're going to take a look at a fascinating short film called French Roast by Fabrice Joubert. So before I jump in, please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't. It's called Kristian Kuhn, the Bob Ross of composition. And sprinkle a little love on it, leave some comments, and tell your friends, colleagues, students far and wide so that I can beat that pesky algorithm. So the film, as I've already alluded to, is on YouTube, and this one's about 7 minutes and 30 seconds long. It's readily available. It's right there for you. So one of the things we're going to take a look at are 3 student exemplars. So they're going to use a heuristic that I called the inverted thesis heuristic. And I'll explain that in just a second here. I'll unpack it for you. But to get my students to write at the caliber that you're going to see, I had to Bob Ross my instruction a lot. So at the time of recording this particular workshop, it's the end of January. My students have been with me since the beginning of September, so the day after Labor Day, and I've gotten to my proverbial easel and canvas and I've air quoted. I've painted a lot of introductions, a lot of body paragraphs for them. So I like to open up the lid of my brain so that they can see my writing process. So if you go back into the annals of the Regents exam and the AP Literature exam, we're talking like you go back to like the 1970s. And you begin to dissect prompts, what you'll see implicit in all those prompts are 2 questions. What is the author's intent, and how does the author construct meaning? In the thesis statement, I like my students to respond directly to both of those questions. So what is the author's intent, and how does the author construct meaning? We call this the inverted thesis because 3 of the 4 sentences in the introductory paragraph are going to respond to the author's intent. Other teachers use different language for that. They call it the universal truth, the universal theme, the exigence. So however you want to cloak and phrase it, by all means, go that route. I say authorial intent. So that guy gets 3 sentences. The construction of meaning sentence gets 1 sentence. So you're going to lead with 3 sentences of author's intent, end with 1 sentence of construction of meaning. So it's called an inverted thesis because whenever you answer the question, how does the author construct meaning, that constitutes and comprises the thesis statement. There's other things that go in here. One is tier 2 level vocabulary, and what I mean by that is just your average run-of-the-mill SAT level caliber words. I run intensive word study academies throughout the academic year, and at this stage of the game, my students that have given me an iota of effort have augmented their vocabularies nicely. I also have a nuance academy that I run with my students, and one of the seminal texts that we dissect is called Strunk and White's Write It Right. And they posit in rule number 18 that there's 12 different sentence types that can be patterned 20 different ways. So I want my students to get away from writing independent clause, short, simple declarative sentence, short, simple declarative sentence, and break that ... tone, that rhythm, that flow that they often have by stacking the same sentence pattern. So in the examples, you're going to see my students crafting some nifty sentence patterns, ultimately in the hopes of achieving that elusive voice rhythm and flow. So here's the first example. It's a 3+1, right? Inverted thesis. I'll take it from the top to the bottom, just read it straight through, and then I'll dissect it for you. In many ways, appearances are truly nothing more and nothing less than glimpses of the unseen. As such, we do not see people as they are, but as projections of our biases and preconceived notions. Therefore, the bum is often the most charitable, the righteous the most sanctimonious, the thief the most virtuous. Fabrice Joubert touches upon this strange irony in her short film, French Rose. And I'm remiss to say this. So the exercise is called 5-minute Thesis, but let me explain how we ran the exercise. I should have said this slides ago. I apologize for being discursive here. So we watched the film twice, okay? I had my students get together in groups and dissect what they deemed to be the 3+1. So they had a little bit of collective help in that. And then I set the timer at 9 minutes, especially because on the AP literature exam, you're cranking 3 essays in 2 hours. And in the Regents exam, you also have 2 essays, but you got about 3 hours to complete that. You got more time. So I said 9 minutes for this. So you're looking at what a student cranked in exactly 9 minutes. So you can see here the first 3 sentences are an articulation of the author's intent. So basically, what's the gist? What's the meat and bones of the short film? And then the last sentence touches upon the terms, devices, techniques that construct the meaning. And this student went singular and went with irony. You can see the vocab is nice without overcooking it. And then in terms of sentence constructs, I always give my students this rule early in the year. Drop sentence 1. And then as you're crafting sentence number 2, make sure that sentence 2 is not identical in terms of the pattern or the type as sentence 1. 3 should be different than 2 and 4 different from 3, and you follow that throughout the entirety of your essay. So that's an example of a 3+1. Let's paint one more in case that is a little nebulous and pie in the sky. Appearances are often deceiving. At face value, based on reading the exterior text of a person, one may appear to be virtuous when they are in fact criminal at the deepest soul level. And those that appear like they have nothing, in fact, have a bountiful life. So we're 3 sentences in, and you can see there, that's just all universal theme, universal truth, exigence, the gist, a thematic overview of the film. The last sentence, we got to get into the terms, the devices, the techniques that constitute and comprise construction of meaning. So look at this last sentence. Fabrice Joubert, in her short film French Rose, conveys this ironic, do you see that, twist of fate through the hyperbolic interplay of dry humor and pronounced characterization. So this student used more terms, devices, techniques than the first. And again, at the AP level, I don't think you need to front load it that much. Some teachers prefer that their students do, so I'm just giving you a couple of different examples here. But one term is enough, and the irony is what really drives this one. That's sort of the culminating force behind it. The other things are just additives in it. So very well done. And again, sentence constructs are cooking. Vocab is up without sounding goonish. And this student is doing a really good job out of the gate. Let's paint it one more time, the inverted thesis heuristic, just to really make sure that we got it and comprehend it and that your students can give it a whirl. When people rely on surface appearances and the false reads of their preconceived biases, rather than in-depth knowledge of others at the level of the heart, their ability to assess and understand accurately is compromised. Kind of a long sentence, but they controlled it. As such, all that glitters is not gold, and all that is dull is not without luster. As such, it is not the appearance that makes the man, but the man who makes the appearance. Fabrice Joubert highlights the irony of such social exchanges in her short film, French Rose. So you can see the last sentence always drops the terms, the devices, the techniques. The first 3 sentences are just universal theme, universal truth, exigence, a thematic umbrella of the film or the poem or the short story or the excerpt that the student is writing about. So these introductions are how my students would do FRQ1 and FRQ2 on the AP literature exam. So that takes us through the whole thing. If you got any questions, feel free to give me an email at teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com. Also note that I host PDs throughout the calendar year. I often travel to districts and work with departments to get them aligned. We can get into my Word Study Academy, my Nuance Academy, how I teach lit analysis. I've taught lit and language and regions and the 9 through 12 gamut for over 2 decades, and so I can work with a wide array of teachers. I also have a self-paced course, if you're interested, that's very comprehensive and goes over all the tools and strategies that I incorporate into my teaching on a daily level. So I have a website called www.teachinghowtowrite.com. There's information about my PD sessions there. If you have any follow-up questions, drop me an email. So I'll keep these coming. I love these exercises. They don't take very long to run, and they're great little in and out exercises to make sure that kids are getting the thesis point systematically each time they write. And they also, even though they're watching films, it helps them with their reads and to cultivate accurate, precise reads. So that's it from here. Be well.